I'm excited to introduce to you Charles Mayu. He's one of our product managers, and he represents the electrical tools we offer. Charles has a real wealth of knowledge that he's acquired over the last 20 years of design and CAD experience. He's held designer positions in a medical and a mining company. He spent several years as a system administrator, so he has some IT background as well. And today he helps customers reduce the time it takes to develop electrical systems while making the process easier and less error prone by providing implementation, training, and even consulting services. I'm confident that Charles is one of the most knowledgeable people in the world when it comes to how these electrical tools work and what all is possible. So I'm excited for him to share his insight with us today. Charles, is your audio working?
I believe so. Thank you, Tim. Everyone can hear me, I hope.
Yep, working good. Hey, Charles, one thing I forgot to mention to the audience is that there are handouts available in the GoToMeeting control panel.
Yes.
Charles has uploaded a PDF of the PowerPoint with all the tips and tricks that he gives along the way, as well as a PDF of the database structure that might be valuable when writing reports.
Yeah, definitely extremely valuable how to do the linking between the different databases that SOLIDWORKS Electrical does have. So it definitely is a huge asset, something that we haven't had for a few years. So helps out tremendously. All right. I think, are we about ready there, right, Tim?
Go for it, yeah.
All right, so before I get into actually discussing this, I want to take a couple polls to find out where everyone's at, such as the first one I want to do is, have you tried to customize a report inside of SOLIDWORKS Electrical? And let me know where about what your feelings are, if you have, if you haven't, if you've never even used SOLIDWORKS Electrical. Let us know on that type of stuff. Be great to get an idea of where you're at, what standpoint you have, and we can go from there. Because today we are going to be talking about a very advanced topic, which will be the SOLIDWORKS Electrical reports and/or design rule checks. They're both SQL-based reporting applications. So with that, so we got a good portion of it there. A lot of you have not even touched it, which is, kind of, probably using a lot of the out-of-the-box reports that are there. A couple of you have tried, had some trouble. Some of you was successful. And it looks like there's a couple of you that haven't even used SOLIDWORKS Electrical before. So if you've never used SOLIDWORKS Electrical before, this webinar may be a little bit out of your range there, a little bit too advanced for you. We're not really going to be covering too much of how to use electrical. We're mostly going to be covering how and where to look at and what information you need to know to be able to write those custom reports that you may be trying to get a hold of. So it may not be a perfect fit for you guys. You're more than welcome to sit around and check it out, but just to really keep in mind that it may not apply directly to you, and we're not really going to be showing too much inside of SOLIDWORKS Electrical per se. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close that poll. All right, so the next one I'm going to go ahead and do is one more poll here just to get an idea of where everyone's at, is how familiar are you with Microsoft SQL? Let me know on that. If you never even heard of what SQL is, that's a great one. It's fine. Just so you understand. If you're not familiar with it, SOLIDWORKS Electrical does run on top of Microsoft SQL, and SQL stands for Structured Query Language. It is the background engine. It's a database tools. Easiest way to explain what the databases are, they're basically large Excel tables is what they are. You've got columns and rows, and there's usually a key row in there or a key column in there, what information is unique identifier for that table, and those is how you kind of connect things up. We'll get into that here in a bit. So it looks like a pretty good selection there. Most of you are fairly new to it, which is fine. We'll have some resources where you can go to find more information about how and where to look up information for SQL and how to find the commands and the type of stuff you're going to need for it to work in it. And those of you that don't know what SQL is, I just kind of explained what it is. It is structured query language. It is a standard database language that's used. Microsoft is one of the companies that provides or produces a server aspect of it. The other one would be Oracle. There's MySQL. There's several other SQL database tools out there. SOLIDWORKS Electrical does use Microsoft SQL So it does help out with that. All right, so we got a pretty good understanding. A couple of you are comfortable. Doesn't look like we have any experts, so that's kind of something different. And to be honest with you, my expertise, I'm kind of falling between that. I'm comfortable and I'm an expert. I don't actually know all the commands offhand, but I know where to look them up and I know how to use them, that type of stuff. So, you know, it's one of those things. As long as you know how to look it up, you're going to be able to find it pretty good. So we'll go ahead and close that poll. And we're going to go ahead and get into this. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about and things we're going to discuss is where to start and where to look and how to find the information, right? So one of the things that we try to tell people is to think about it in the beginning. Try to do customization of those reports during your implementation when you first start using the application, because yeah, you can add reports to projects later on down the road, but it's always great to have them there to begin with. So try to think about during the implementation process, right? Secondly is customizing reports, you know, seems to be a feared type of thing, but the easiest way is to actually map it out. And a lot of times I tell customers if they're asking me to help them out with it or they're asking for some guidance, is give an example of exactly what you want. So create an Excel spreadsheet, give it all the columns, give it all the rows, not necessarily all the rows, but give it all the columns and then fill in the columns in a row of what information you want in that column, where it should be pulling from, what type of information you're going to have. So if you're looking at, say, a report that you want to pull of, I want to see where every drawing that a cable shows up on. You got to think about, okay, what am I looking for? Cable tag, right? Okay, then what drawings is it? Where is it at? That type of stuff. You got to think about where everything's going to go through, right? And one thing to think about is reports are a one-time thing, just like title blocks, just like manufacturer's parts. You do it once, you save it to the shared, you know, locations, which is by default is where it puts it in the application settings, and it's there. Everyone else can use it. You set it up once and you go forward. The only time you may need to adjust it, a report slightly, is if you're changing your drawing template size, your title block size, going from like a B to a C or a C to a D size drawing. You have to adjust a little bit, so that way it places it on that drawing correctly in the right location and that type of stuff, but that's pretty easy. The other thing is if you're gonna go from metric to inch or inch back to metric as far as your unit of measure and your drawing sizes, there is a little bit extra work that has to go on to make sure that those apply to both of them, okay? And then the last thing is, this presentation is really meant for advanced users. So, you know, like I mentioned earlier, you're more than welcome to stay to understand, get a little better understanding of it, but some of the things that we're gonna assume is that you've already had training. And a lot of the basics of reporting inside of SOLIDWORKS Electrical is covered in the advanced training class, which we do offer. So at the end, I'll have a little bit of things and some questions on that type of stuff. In fact, we have an advanced class coming up next week. If you're wanting to get into that, we can definitely give you the information on that. It's actually next Thursday and Friday. We'll be doing an advanced class. The other thing too is familiar with SQL stuff. And one of the best places to learn it is this w3schools.com. They're a phenomenal online resource that's free. So you can go there, you can learn the basics of how to create simple queries, how to combine stuff, how to look up stuff, that type of things. Is a great place to learn it is in that W3 Schools. And it's simple as www.w3schools.com /SQL/. That'll get you right into it, right? Okay. Now there's one other thing to think and keep in mind is in the actual advanced interface for reports, we don't use double quotes or reverse, right? So it says to use reverse brackets instead of double quotes. And that's just the way the programmers have wrote it to interface with SQL. So if you're actually doing stuff in Management Studio, which is a interface into Microsoft SQL directly, you would use double quotes. Inside of SOLIDWORKS Electrical, you're going to use the double reverse brackets. Those replace the double quotes. You'll see that in some places that we'll be working on. Okay. Now a refresher. How do I begin? How do I even get to the reports to modify them and change it and adjust it and do all that type of stuff, right? So there's two ways to get to it. One thing is you have to have a project open. We can't work on a report without a project open. The reason being, it needs some data set to work with to be able to find everything and look for it, right? So the first and easiest one is from the project tab is just click on the reports. That brings up the reports manager, and it brings up what reports are actually part of that project. Okay, one thing to keep in mind of making those changes through the manager is if you make a change to a report through the reports manager in the project, it actually copies that report to the project and modifies that copy, all right? The second way to get to it is through the configurations down button on the project tab also, but then going down to reports, which is the configurations manager. So we've got two different things to keep in mind. We've got reports manager, which are the reports inside of the project. And then we've got reports configuration manager, which is the reports that are in the application. So we just got to keep in mind of those two different locations, okay? So here is the reports manager, or actually this is the reports configuration manager, sorry. That is part of the application. So on the left-hand side, we have the application, which are all the red reports. And then on the right-hand side, we have the green, which are the ones specific to this project, okay? All right, so the green is the project, and you can see there's two different interfaces at top. One to the left is the management is the application. One to the right is the management of the project. Okay, and you can copy them back and forth from the project to the application, from the application to the project. You can do that type of stuff. All right, so next question is, where's the SQL editor? How do I actually get to it and modify these reports? Well, if we go from the reports manager, which is the project reports, we're going to click on the property. So we'll highlight a report and then click on properties, which brings up the properties box of that report. And then at the very bottom, you'll notice there's a button that says activate expert mode. That will actually get you into the SQL query editor for SOLIDWORKS Electrical. All right, and this would give you the way to look at it. You can test your query to see what it actually is giving you. You've got several options. You can open up a file, which will open up the XML file, which is where it's stored. You can lock it, you can edit it. You can also export the query into true SQL language, which would allow you to use it inside of Management Studio, okay? So SQL Management Studio is a tool that I use to look at the databases to find the information I'm trying to find, right? So I could look at it through the SQL editor, but sometimes I'm not sure exactly what information is being pulled and what the what the tables look like, right? So I'll use Management Studio. And if you have never used Management Studio, it is a tool that is free to download from Microsoft. And what allows us to do is connect directly into our SQL server, right? So I'm already connected into my SQL server here. And I can actually view every single database that is in my SQL database. Now, if you're familiar with SOLIDWORKS Electrical and how it works, is that we've got a database for every project. So when we create a new project, it creates a new database. And that's where all the information is stored for that specific project. But we also have an app data, which is general information for the application. We have all of our macros. We have our projects, our catalog. Now the catalog is actually where all the manufacturer's parts are stored. And we also have classifications right here, okay? Which is all the classifications that are in the application. So let's take a look at a project here. So I have a project open. And if we were to take a look at it, let me figure out which ID this one is. It's ID 140, right? So that if you're ever wondering, okay, I'm in a specific project, I want to find where the information is for that project, what we're going to do is look at that ID. So project 140. We'll come back over to Management Studio and we'll come down to project 140, which is right here, TEW project _ data 140. All right, so if we expand that out and then expand out all the tables, this is going to be a list of all of our tables that this project has, from, you know, the wires to the symbols that are used to the components, the bill of materials. All of that information is stored in here down to the lines. Everything's stored in this for this project. All right, so that's kind of how it's broken out and how it's displayed and stored. Okay, come back over to our PowerPoint here. Getting a little ahead on stuff. So in 2012 through 2018, the first rendition of SOLIDWORKS Electrical and the report editor was very limited in what we saw. What we had was basically just the table view. So what we could do is come in here and view the tables, right? So we'd open it up, we'd see all of our tables, and we could bring in tables. Now the question is how do you connect these tables and how do you get from point A to point B to get your information, right? Like I had mentioned before, you've got key values, which are your identifiers that cross between tables. So you got to understand what those are. And in the handouts, there's a PDF version of this for you to look at. It is for 2020 SP1, I believe is what it was written for. So it talks about how each table interacts with the other table and what the unique identifiers are to be able to connect those two tables between each other. Now this really works and interfaces with the 2018 version and prior, right? 2012 through 2018 version. You really got to understand this type of stuff to really write a good report, you know, getting from the component to the wires to the cables, all that connection between each other, right? And that's what we're going to talk about right here. So how do I connect my components to my wires? Well, you grab your component, you got to say, okay, my wire COM ID from equals COM ID is what you're seeing, all right? And then wire COM to, so you got a from and a to for these wires from these components, and then to the ID. So you kind of got some information that you're looking at. A lot of times we're going to look at these IDs and link those together between the different tables. You know, to get to the wire, and then go from wire to the cable, you're going to look at wire cable ID equals wire cable ID, or equals cable ID. Okay. So in the actual SQL query, what it's going to look like is from my TEW components, because I'm going to tell it to pull the component table first, or the component database or table. Then I'm going to left join, which means I'm going to take the information that's in my wire and combine it to the left of my TEW components table, right? So my component table has all the information that I want to pull for, and then amend it with the stuff from the wires, okay? But we got to tell it how to amend it, what to link, what to connect. And what we're going to use is the COM ID. So down here at the bottom, you notice there's COM ID, right? So down here at the bottom, we've got TEW. So we're going to do left join TEW wire on TEW component dot COM ID, because inside of our component table, there is a COM ID column, is equal to the TEW wire dot wire COM ID from is what we're going to look at. Okay. So we're just going to look at the from wires right now. And then to get the cable on that, we have to do another left join, which is we're going to left join the TEW cable on the TEW wire dot wire cable ID equal to the TEW cable dot cable ID. So basically we went from the component to the wire to the cable is how you'd have to do it. Now, keep in mind, this is all prior to 2019. Okay, so this is 2012 through 2018. Right, and then there's also extra information that we may need, such as descriptions. Maybe we want to grab the cable description into that. So that has to bring in a third database because all of our descriptive information is stored in translatable data, right? So if you wanted to add additional fields to whatever it may be, in this case, we're looking at a book, right? So this book, we're looking at the description, we've got user data 1, user data 2, translatable data 1, translatable data 2. Technically, the description is also a translatable data, okay? So to get to that, we've got to hit the customize button down here. And what that will do is bring out the user data customization here, right? So this kind of just shows that if we click on the properties of the book, go to the customizing of the properties, it'll bring up our user data customization, which includes our user data fields and our translatable text fields, okay? Now, both the user data and translatable text are stored in two separate databases, so keep that in mind, all right? Or tables within the database, I say. So user data, we're looking at object ID equals, object ID, right? So user object ID equals whatever the object is. Same thing with translatable text. TRA object ID equals whatever the object ID is, right? So if a cable, we're looking at cable ID, okay? So if we want to join in the description of the cable to what we had before, what we're going to do is do another left join on the translatable text table, but we've got to join it on the cable ID. So we're going to look at the cable ID, so, right? Looking at the cable ID right here, equals the translatable text TRA object ID, right? And so we're going to add an and factor in here. So we're actually going to join it on 3 different things technically on this one. The stored object ID equals a cable. And it's just to help filter it out, just to help prevent it from grabbing any wrong information. The likelihood that you have 2 IDs that are the same is very unlikely. The application actually applies unique IDs to everything. So this is just a little bit of extra redundancy to help prevent some cross errors if possible. And then the last thing is we've got to tell it what language code to use, right? If you actually look at the translatable text database, right? So we come down here, translatable text. If I just right click on it and say select top 1000 rows, it's going to give me the top 1000 rows that are in this table. May take a little time to come up with it and find it, but you can see there's a language string ID here. And this is just a 2-character representation of all the languages that potentially could be in your project. Remember, you can have up to 3 languages in your project, but the database has to store it in every language that we have possible, right? So you do have quite a bit. And if we take a look at the project properties, right, or the configuration of the project, right here we've got language 1, language 2, and then the 3rd language is French. We've got quite a few language options in here. So every one of these language option has an entry in that translatable text field. So just be aware of that. It is cumbersome sometimes. So what we're doing in this PowerPoint is we're using a variable in the report here. We're telling it to grab the project language code. All right, so we're telling it to look at the project. What's that first language? The very top one, right, inside of our project here. What's the language code for this inside of our project, which happens to be English, right? So it's going to be EN. So if we look at our report here, EN would be that. So that's for, you know, on that one right there. That would be whatever that translatable object ID is. That's the English, happens to be black, right? So whatever this one is, it's the black. And then there's file information for, you know, terminal strips, there's BOM information, something here for it's a BOM object. It's mounting plate, looks like the back panel for a control panel. So it's all that information is stored in there, right? So it's all there for us. So that's kind of how we get to the translatable text and bring that in for a description, right? So that's all there in that location for us, okay? So this is showing again, cable ID, cab, doing that double qualification of the component, right? So there's got to be an easier way to do this though. So they came out, the programmers looked at it between 2018 and 2019, and they thought about how can we make this easier for people to be able to modify their own reports without having to be an expert in Microsoft SQL, right? Knowing every single command, how to join, how to left join, how to union. These are all commands that you're going to be able to do and see how to get stuff together. So in 2019, they brought out what are these views. So we got tables and views. We've got simple views and we've got extended views, all right? So they also added in keywords for us or variables, right? So the keywords like project language code 2, language code 3, all right? Classifications, bundles, which is the current book, you know, all that stuff. Application project database, application macro, those are all things available. They also added in other databases that are part of the application level, right? So the projects database, the macros database, the catalog, which is all your manufacturer's parts, the cable reference catalog, classifications, and then the app data, okay? The app data is actually a good one to know, the TEW app data, because it's got additional information in there for you, all right? So we've got, in 2019 and 2020, we've got tables, which we had before. We have simple views, which are an expansion of the tables. So it takes like everything that's related to my off-page designators, my origin and destination arrows, which is the automate in and out, right? Or the bundles, which is books, cables. Gives me kind of everything generally connected to those, which would be the user data fields and the translatable text fields for those objects get connected. And then we have what's called extended views. The extended views is basically anything that's connected to that table, the original upper level table. So like in this particular one, we got highlighted as the PLC inputs and outputs, right? So it grabs the inputs and outputs, and it grabs the main fields, which is the inputs and outputs information. It grabs the translatable text, the user data fields, grabs the bill material fields, the component fields, or component element fields, which is the circuit information, the components, the file, which is the drawings that it's on, the functions, the symbols, and the wires. So it combines everything up together, makes it a lot easier for writing these reports and combining the information on that, okay? So in the PDF also is this on the database structure PDF, and that talks about what type of fields are in the extended views and in the standard views, okay? Once again, this is part of the handout, the PDF of that handout, okay? And then here's some more information about types of stuff. And there's an example of how to write using the TEWs and using the views and the extended views. As you can see, using only the database or only the tables, your reports gets pretty long because you're doing a lot of joins and unions and all of that type of stuff. Whereas mixing in the views and the extended views, it shrinks it down because everything's already kind of connected up for you. In essence, what happens in the views and the extended views is the application is doing those unions and those joins for you automatically. And they're temporary databases that are already set up for the reports to pull from, okay? So let me go back to here in this expert mode before we get through this. Let's take a look at a potential report that you may want to write. And this is one of the ones I talked about earlier was, let's take a look at, I want a report that tells me everywhere my cable shows up, every drawing that my cable shows up. And that could include, see if I've got it in here. I don't have it in this one. Let's see. This project, but let's take a look at it. Let's go into our reports. So if we go to our reports manager here, all right, so we've got cables drawn on reports. I do have this one already written here, but let's start over from scratch so you guys can see where that's pulling from. But this is kind of what we want. We want to know our cable tag, the manufacturer, the part number, if it has the length, you know, if I didn't insert the information or if I routed it in 3D, and then what drawings does it show up on, right? So currently it only shows up on one. But if I were to just insert a new drawing here, and this one being a line diagram drawing, right? And we go ahead and insert some symbols here. So I'll go to our list here. So we've got our X1 terminal block. So we'll insert a symbol for that and drop that there. That's fine. Should have drawn a different symbol. Let me delete that and reinsert that. Let's go other symbol here. Let's grab our actual terminal block symbol. So we'll grab this one here. So we'll just place that here. And then we'll go to our motors, right? So we got our M1, M2, M3. So we'll insert symbols for that. We'll drop M1 up here. We'll drop M2 down here. And then just to add some complexity to this, right? We're gonna go ahead and enter or create another, if I click on the right spot here, another drawing, right? So we got 101. And on this one, we'll insert M3 just to add some complexity to it, right? So we'll insert symbol. I'll just place that here. Okay, so M1, we'll go ahead and draw our cables to show our connections, right? Now, because this is already predefined, it should pick up those cables. And if I double click on this, it's gonna show that that's there. We just have to do our reservation, right? To make sure that it's connected. Okay, so we'll get that, we'll close that. Draw another cable here. Go on down to our M2. Same thing, do our core reservation, should be W2. And then I will actually just draw this one out like this. and then stop that, and then go to our 101, draw a cable here. And what we're going to do is origin destinations, and we will connect up that one to that one. Okay. And then I can double click on this and do our core reservation here and make sure that one's W3. And so we'll connect that up really quick. And then if we go back to our reports, we now see that that also shows 100 and 101 as drawings, right? So how did I get it to show both schematic and line diagrams? Now that's the key here to think about. So we want to be able to show everywhere that it's on a drawing, everywhere there's cables. Even this one, you see it shows it across two of them, right? So I'm going to close this. We're going to go to our configurations, go to our reports. Okay. So I already have it here, cables drawn on reports. That's not going to work for us. I'm going to start from scratch here. And I basically created some blank test reports here. These have no information to them, no SQL queries already in them. These are specific to my system. If I was going to use this, I may need to start with one of the other ones and blow away everything that's in there. But what we're going to do is start with that. So I'm going to click the duplicate button here. Okay. So one thing to think about, I probably should have mentioned this earlier, is anytime we're going to make a change to a report, especially if you're going to change one of the default reports, I tell people to duplicate it first. The reason being is when I go to do an update, if I want to go, I make my change, I need to go from 2020 to 2021 in October, any of my defaultly named reports could potentially be overwritten during that update process. Okay, during the upgrade, remember after you first do an upgrade, there's an update that happens after the upgrade. So it potentially could overwrite those default reports. So you don't want to make changes to the default reports, okay? You may lose your report in the future. So I tell people anytime you need to make a change to one of the default reports, make a copy, rename it to your unique identifier and give it your own information. So what we're going to do is rename this instead of just being test blank. We're going to call this, tables on drawing report. Now you have to have a unique name for it. I'm going to go -1. So I'm going to say cables on drawings is what I'm going to call it. All right, so that's going to be the name of it. I'm going to go ahead and click the apply. So it updates the name of it. Okay. So it's going to basically make those changes in the background, update the database with the correct report names, update the XML file that's stored in the application area. So, nope, looks like I crashed SOLIDWORKS. We'll go ahead and open it up again here. So as that's opening up again, I'm starting to think about what I'm actually looking to do. And part of the things I'm looking to do, right, is to figure out what every drawing that cable is drawn on, right? So I got to think about that. What did I actually draw though? I drew cables and I drew wires and associated them to cables. Okay, so that's kind of where I got to think about what I'm doing. And we'll go back into our project, go back down to our reports, and we will see if it is, yep, it's right there. Drawings on cables. Okay, so we'll come back into this. So go back to our general, what type of drawing is this? I'm going to click the down arrow. It's a cable drawing, right? So we're talking about cables here. Okay. So the styles is set up for information. We have no columns. So before we can even start applying columns, we got to turn in and get into our SQL queries here. All right. So it did keep something, which was the sort and break. So it did keep some information in there. Go ahead and turn that off. Just go ahead and clear this out because that information is no longer valid. We'll come back over the SQL query. So we got back to our database here. What are we thinking about? We're looking at where and how things are drawn, right? So we're trying to figure out how our wires or cables are drawn. So technically what we drew here is lines, okay? So if we take a look at our extended view here, extended wires, let's take a look at extended cables actually. So we've got our cables. Take a look at what we have in here. Cable cores, function, location. I don't see anything about drawings though with cables. So we can't really use our extended cables here. Let me look at our regular tables, or extended views or tables. What I'm actually going to look at in here is this line. And what this is, it's the polylines in schemes or line diagrams. All right. So I got line ID. Oh, cable IDs right there. That's what I'm looking for, right? It's cables. So that's actually pretty promising. So we come back over here to SQL Management Studio. This is kind of how I work. As I'll come in and look at lines. Okay, so let's take a look at top 1,000 rows on that. So I got line ID, a lot of different information in here, link type. So you kind of have to understand what's going on here with what we're actually working on and what columns might be there, what I might be looking at, right? There's the line text, like what type of lines it is. There's the table for the cable text that shows up on the line diagram or shows up on the wire diagram. Equipotential ID, a lot of stuff that's in here. So we kind of look through and see what's there, associated types, all that type of stuff. So it seems like there's not much information here that's really valuable to us from this perspective, right? But we got to think about how we're going to connect everything up to each other. There's symbol, there's all sorts of different stuff in here. Okay, so if we come back over to, but we see that there is the SIM ID label, which is the cable ID label. That's there. Okay, that's good. Oh, there's the file ID. So we can get the file ID that's there. So what file or what drawing it's on. So that kind of makes a little bit of sense. There's some wire ID if we're looking at wires, that type of stuff. So let me go ahead and close this for now. I'm going to apply it and close it. Because what I want to do is go ahead and open up that other one to show you guys what I'm going to be looking at and working on. So I want to show you guys just kind of the basics. I don't want to have you guys sit here and watch me type out and do all of my full research and full all of that. We wouldn't have time. I think this one took me about an hour and a half to 2 hours to write, just to get through, to find everything the first time, actually look for all the connectivity between everything, figure out how to connect everything up, and to bring in descriptions. So I did have to do some extra, linking of tables. But I actually did this the old-fashioned way using just the tables, not all of the extended views. So as we're looking in here, you can see here's my select. First I'm grabbing is the line one, right? So TEW line is what I'm grabbing first. So I'm selecting the line and I'm grabbing the line ID is the first thing I'm grabbing, right? So you can come down here, you can see under tables, it highlights the ones that I have joined in. So I grab the line first. And if I expand the line, you can see that all of the columns that I'm calling out, which is line ID, the file ID, the mesh ID, and the cable cores. I didn't actually grab the cable ID. So that's one thing I didn't grab. All right. And what I'm doing from there is I'm joining the file reports. The first thing is I'm grabbing the lines, and then I'm grabbing what drawing those lines are on, right? So TW line.line file ID, and then I'm coming and grabbing the file table, which is giving me the title, which is the mark, right? File mark. That's all I'm grabbing for this one. I'm not grabbing descriptions or anything like that. I'm just grabbing file title, okay? And then I'm gonna join the wire on the wire mesh ID. All right, so the mesh ID is the actual wire distinction. So we go take a look at our wire down here. I'm joining wires. So wire ID, right? So TEW line mesh ID or the wire mesh ID SYN is equal to the mesh ID. So the reason I had to do both of them, the IDSYN is cables, and just the mesh ID is just the wires. So it's looking at it, linking those up, grabbing both of them. And then I'm going to join the cable report, or the cable table, I should say, cables, on the cable ID, right? So on cable ID equals TEW wire cable ID. So I'm making that mesh, that join there between those. And then I'm joining in the bundles also. The reason I did that one on this particular case, I wanted to sort or create one report per bundle or per book. So I wanted to only see the cables that are in that book or apply to that book. Now, technically a cable can spread across books. So a cable could show up on 2 books, but I only wanted to see, okay, is this cable on this book? Is this cable on this book? That type of stuff, right? All right, and then finally I wanted to bring in the descriptions. So I had to bring in the translatable text for the book in on that also. So when you join a table, you can join a table as a specific text. So if I need to bring in multiple translatable text for multiple objects, I'm gonna basically label what that translatable text is. So in this particular case, the translatable text as the book text. So I'm bringing in descriptions for just the book. But if I want to bring in the descriptions for the cables or the descriptions for the components or the, in this particular case, the drawings that it might be on, I'd also want to join the translatable text again as drawing text, as cable text, that type of stuff, right? And then here's the rest of that join to get that information. So we've got the bundle ID equals the book translatable object ID, and the book translatable language string equals the project language code. Where, and then I'm going where cable ID does not equal. So, you know, knowing some of this information, you just can't, there is no, does not equal symbol on the keyboard, right? So knowing that you do a exclamation point equals is SQL for does not equal, okay? -1. So if it doesn't have a cable or it doesn't have a object associated to it, it is stored as -1 in the database, okay? And the TEW line ID does not equal -1. Once again, if I'm doing text, which -1 is text, I got to put the reverse brackets around it. And the bundle ID equals the current bundle ID. So that is giving me basically the one book per bundle, which comes under the layout down here, right? So one book, one report per book. That's what that gives me there, okay? And then ordering by the cable tag, sorting by ASCII, and then the file title by ASCII is what it's doing, right? If you guys aren't familiar with the sort order inside of SQL, it doesn't follow traditional sorting. Especially if your tags or your file IDs get into the double digits, and you don't have leading zeros, you'll see 1, and then 10, and then 11, 12, and then it'll fall back down to 2, 3, 4. So it doesn't follow the ASCII sort order. That's what this ASC telling it to do, is to follow that ASCII sort order. So that way it shows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, doing that versus the 1, 11, or 1, 10, 11, that information, okay? So if we do a test on this, you'll actually see everything that it's pulling, right? So it's pulling the descriptions, it's pulling all this information. And in fact, it's actually pulling more information than we need or want to display, right? Because it's actually grabbing the individual cores that are on drawings too, not just the single drawing or the single cable. So that's where coming into the columns information and telling it to merge columns based off what information you do have, right? So I'm telling it to merge the cable tags, is what I'm telling it to merge. Merge on cable tags, show the manufacturer, the part number, but don't duplicate the manufacturer, don't duplicate anything else. The drawing titles, I'm gonna add a comma between them, right? So if I wanna show a comma, a dash, whatever it may be, I can change that character just by typing it in there to show that differences in there. Now, one thing to remember when it comes to lengths, right? So wire lengths, cable lengths, lengths of DIN rails or wire ducts, all of those, technically the length is stored in the database as millimeters, okay? They had to decide on what unit of measure and how to store it, and it applies to everything. Doesn't matter if your project is set to be inches or imperial, it's still stored as millimeters, okay? So in our reports, we have to tell it to do the math, pull the millimeter and convert it. So in my column content here for my length of my cable, I've got it doing some rounding and pulling that information for me, right? And this particular one, I did a advanced formula here that's saying if it's longer than a foot, give me feet and inches. If it's shorter than a foot, give me inches. That's what I have it telling, or not feet and inches. I have it telling doing just feet down to 2 digits. And then if it's less than a foot, give me inches down to 2 digits is what I have it doing. And that's just doing the formulas. If you're not familiar with formulas, that's another thing that's touched on during our training classes. You know, if statements, the functions are all here as far as mathematical functions, the text functions that you can do, and the various functions also here. Okay, so those are variables, recent, formulas. Here's all your variables, which are actually pulled from the report and all that type of stuff. So that's kind of the basics of looking at a report from scratch. You got to figure out where the information is that you're looking for and how to link it and apply it all together. So we'll go ahead and close that. Go back to our PowerPoint. So additional offerings that we have from Hawkridge. If you don't want to take this on yourself, we do offer services such as custom report writing, manufacturer's library creation. We also do offer software upgrades. So if you don't want to tackle upgrading from 2019 to 2020 yourself, that's definitely something that you can contract us to do. Now, one of the other things that's not too familiarly known out there is that we finally do have API availability. It's been about for a year and a half now. It came out mid 2018 that we were able to have API. If you're not familiar with API, it's the Advanced Programming Interface. Allows us to write external code to interact with SOLIDWORKS Electrical. Great for connecting into PLM, ERP systems, great for automating some other small, minute tasks that you might want to do. And then also our training offerings. You know, we do offer SOLIDWORKS Electrical schematic training, electrical 3D, and then like I mentioned earlier, electrical advanced training. As far as training information, if you want to look up the schedules, you can find all that on our website, which is just hawkridgesys.com. Go to the training, you can look that up. So just want to leave this up there for you guys too. This is our whole suite of what we offer, from our design software to our managed software to our simulate software to our manufacturing software, right? So we do have the full suite of SOLIDWORKS products, and also Hawkridge is our Dassault reseller also. So we do have CATIA, we do have the 3D Experience stuff, Delmia Works, Exelead, and Novia, which is all part of the upper level Dassault systems offerings, along with Solulia and all of that type of stuff. And then we do have a barrage of manufacturing options that we also offer, from 3D printers to CamWorks to SOLIDWORKS CAM to 3D scanners. And obviously we have our training and services that we also offer our customers. So once again, thank you guys.